She said she rides for her. She looked directly into those cameras, kept her voice steady, and told the world that her relationship with Caitlin Clark is great, that she loves Caitlin, that they are more alike than different, and that anybody turning this into a story is just chasing clicks. And then on the same day that press conference hit the internet, news broke that Caitlin Clark's boyfriend, Conor McAffrey, had just accepted a coaching position with the Noblesville Boom, the Indiana Pacers G League affiliate, 40 minutes away from Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And suddenly, a completely different kind of conversation started. Not about drama, not about confrontations, about roots, about permanence, about what it might mean when someone plants themselves that deep into a city's basketball infrastructure. Welcome to Street Hoops. I'm Dre Fiver, and today we are peeling back every layer of this Indiana fever situation, the real contract picture, what Conor McAffrey's move actually means, what Stephanie White's own coaching history tells us, and why, despite everything, the most complicated question in women's basketball right now is not whether Caitlin Clark is staying in Indiana. It is whether Indiana deserves to keep her. Let's get into it. Let's start with the Conor McAffrey development, because this is the piece of news that created genuine optimism inside the Caitlin Clark fan community at a moment when optimism has been in short supply. According to reporting from Fieldhouse Files beat reporter Scott Agnes, yes, the same Scott Agnes whose credentials the Fever recently revoked, which we will circle back to, McCaffery has accepted a player development assistant role with the Noblesville Boom, the G League affiliate of the Indiana Pacers. McCaffery spent the last 2 seasons on the coaching staff at Butler University under legendary coach Thad Matta, and before that, he spent a year inside the Pacers organization itself as a team assistant. He is now stepping up to the professional player development level, joining an organization that shares a parent company, Pacers Sports and Entertainment, with the Indiana Fever. The Boom are based 40 minutes from Indianapolis. The move keeps him rooted inside the Indiana basketball ecosystem at the exact moment Caitlin Clark's future with the franchise is generating the most public scrutiny and uncertainty it ever has. Now Dre Fiver is going to give it to you completely straight here. Conor McAffrey taking a G League job does not confirm that Caitlin Clark is signing a long-term extension with Indiana. It does not confirm anything about Clark's contractual decisions at all. Those are 2 separate people making 2 separate professional choices. What it does do is add a real, tangible, verifiable data point to the conversation about Clark's personal ties to Indiana as a place, not just as a basketball organization. McCaffery has deep roots in this state. He played college ball at Iowa under his father, Fran McCaffery. He spent time with the Pacers. He coached at Butler. He is now joining the Boom. He is building a coaching career inside the Indiana basketball infrastructure brick by brick. That is a real life being built in this city. And for Clark, whose personal and professional worlds are deeply intertwined with Indiana, that context matters when the conversation turns to where she will be playing basketball in the years ahead. But here is where Dre needs to pump the brakes just enough to give you the actual contract picture, because the discourse around Clark's future in Indiana has gotten genuinely sloppy with facts, and on Street Hoops we do not do sloppy. Clark is currently in her 3rd professional season on a 4-year rookie-scale contract. Her salary for the 2026 season, elevated significantly by the new collective bargaining agreement that came into effect this year, sits at over $500,000, a massive jump from the $78,000 she made last season under the old CBA structure. The Indiana Fever have already exercised the 4th-year option on that contract, which means Clark is under contract with Indiana through at least the 2027 season. After that, she becomes a restricted free agent, which means Indiana would have the right to match any offer she receives from another team. The new CBA also introduced something called the Epic Clause, Exceptional Performance on Initial Contract. This provision allows top-tier players who have hit specific performance benchmarks to negotiate a multi-year extension earlier than the traditional timeline would permit. The Indiana Fever's front office has already confirmed publicly that locking Clark up long-term through this mechanism is their stated priority. General Manager Amber Cox went on record saying the organization wants Clark and Aaliyah Boston around for the duration of their careers, and that the Epic Clause gives them the runway to plan for that future in ways the old CBA structure simply did not allow. So when you hear conversation about Clark potentially signing a massive extension, that is the mechanism being discussed, and the framing from the Fever's own front office is that it is not a matter of if, but how and when. Dre's personal opinion on the contract situation? The numbers alone do not decide this. Caitlin Clark could negotiate a max-level extension that makes her one of the highest-paid players in the history of women's professional basketball. The Fever have the contractual architecture to make that happen, and the financial incentive is enormous on both sides. But contracts get signed when players feel valued, when they trust the environment around them, when the competitive situation matches the ambitions they hold. And right now, 8 games into the 2026 season, sitting at 4-4 with a viral sideline confrontation on the highlight reel and their longest-serving beat reporter banned from the building, the Indiana Fever are not presenting themselves as an organization that has fully earned the trust required to get that signature. Conor McAffrey planting roots in Indiana creates a favorable personal environment for Clark to stay. Whether the franchise can meet her professional expectations is an entirely separate question, and the more urgent one. Because let's get into Stephanie White directly, since she opened the door wide with that press conference, and Dre is walking straight through it. White sat in front of those cameras and said she and Clark are more alike than different. She said they both have intense competitive drive. She said they challenge each other to think and see differently. And she said, specifically, that their relationship is great and that she rides for Caitlin. Dre Fiver is not going to tell you that White is lying in that moment. I think she believes most of what she said. But there is a gap, a significant, measurable, documented gap between what Stephanie White says about her relationship with Clark and what the basketball evidence tells us about the environment she has created around her. Here is what riding for Caitlin Clark actually looks like. It looks like building a defensive scheme that protects her from the exact isolation matchup vulnerabilities that every team in the league has now identified and is exploiting by design. It looks like refusing to run a switch-everything philosophy that puts a 5'9" guard in one-on-one situations against post players because you are philosophically committed to a system that does not fit your personnel. It looks like not subbing your franchise player, your lead guard, your primary playmaker out of a game with 6.5 minutes left in the first quarter when Indiana is winning, watching the team immediately surrender a massive run in her absence and then explaining it as routine workload management. Riding for someone means building around her strengths, protecting her weaknesses, and creating the conditions for her to be her absolute best self on the basketball floor. And the on-court evidence through 8 games of the 2026 season suggests those conditions are not consistently present. And now, Dre is going to do what too many people in this conversation are still afraid to do, which is put Stephanie White's full coaching resume on the table and examine it with the same rigor we would apply to any other candidate for one of the most visible and scrutinized head coaching jobs in American professional sports. White went 46-83 at Vanderbilt across 5 seasons before being fired in April of 2021. She went 13-54 in SEC play. Vanderbilt had never lost more than 16 games in a season before her arrival, and under her leadership, those kinds of loss totals became normalized. But the win-loss record, as bad as it is, still is not the most instructive part of the Vanderbilt story. The most instructive part is what happened with the players. Across White's tenure at Vanderbilt, at least 9 starters transferred out of the program. Not role players, not developmental prospects. Starters, the team's leading scorers. Key contributors who chose to exercise transfer eligibility at a time in college basketball when transferring meant sacrificing an entire year of playing eligibility rather than continue in that program. Players were paying a tangible professional price to get out. When that pattern repeats itself with multiple players across multiple years, the honest analysis does not land on the players as the problem. The honest analysis asks what the common denominator is in every departure. And the common denominator was the head coaching environment. Now, White pivoted to the WNBA after Vanderbilt and spent 2 seasons with the Connecticut Sun before landing in Indianapolis. And here is where the narrative gets deliberately selective, because the people defending White's record want to point to the 2025 Fever season as evidence of her coaching ability, and it is a legitimate data point. Indiana went 24-20 and made an underdog run to the WNBA semifinals without a healthy Caitlin Clark for the majority of the season. That took real tactical intelligence and real roster management. But here is the part that never gets mentioned in the same breath. Indiana made that semifinal run in large part because of the talent and leadership of Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell. Both of them carried enormous loads during Clark's extended absences. The question that Dre Fiver keeps returning to is, when Clark is healthy, when she is on the floor, when the team is built around maximizing the greatest player in the league, does the coaching environment make her better? And through 8 games of this season, the answer is not encouraging. Let's also address the Kelsey Mitchell dimension here, because it keeps surfacing in the discourse, and it deserves a direct and honest response. There is a narrative being pushed in some corners that Mitchell is actually the Fever's best player, that the team operates better with her as the primary option, and that Clark's presence creates as many problems as it solves. Dre's take on this? Kelsey Mitchell is a legitimate, elite professional basketball player. She leads the Fever in scoring this season, averaging over 20 points a game. She just moved into the top 3 all-time in franchise history in assists. She is a real contributor and a genuine professional. But the suggestion that Indiana would be better served building around Mitchell rather than Clark is not a basketball argument, it is a narrative argument, and the data does not support it. Clark leads the entire WNBA in assists per game this season and is averaging over 20 points herself. She is the engine of the entire offensive system when she is on the floor and playing freely. The attendance numbers, the television ratings, the cultural reach, all of it follows Clark everywhere she goes. Mitchell is a critical piece of the puzzle. She is not the puzzle itself. What this organization needs to come to grips with, urgently and honestly, is that the window they have to build something meaningful around Caitlin Clark in Indiana is not unlimited. The fourth-year option has been exercised, which keeps her in an Indiana uniform through 2027. The Epic Clause creates a pathway to a long-term extension. Conor McAffrey is now 40 minutes away, building a life and a coaching career inside the Pacers and Boom ecosystem. There are real, legitimate reasons to believe Caitlin Clark has genuine personal and professional roots in Indiana that she values. But none of that automatic. None of that is guaranteed. And none of that survives an extended period of organizational dysfunction, broken defensive schemes, public confrontations with the coaching staff, credential revocations of the beat reporter who has been covering the team for 13 years, and front office figures using media proxies to call the franchise player a diva behind her back. Here is what the Indiana Fever organization needs to do, and Dre Fiver is not going to dress this up in diplomatic language. Fix the defensive scheme. Stop running a switch-everything philosophy that turns Clark into an isolation target on every possession when you do not have the personnel to execute it. Build a genuine offensive structure that creates open looks for Clark instead of watching 4 quarters of basketball go by without a single designed play for the best player on the floor. Address the player-coach communication dynamic in a way that does not result in viral sideline confrontations on nationally broadcast games. And treat the journalists covering this team with the professional respect that 13-year institutional knowledge deserves, because the Scott Agnes credential situation sends a message to every reporter in the building about what happens when you cover this franchise with independence and accuracy. And that message is corrosive to the long-term health of the organization. Clark, for her part, has handled this entire situation with a level of grace and professionalism that is frankly remarkable given everything being thrown at her. She defended Stephanie White publicly after the Portland confrontation. She took personal accountability for her defensive struggles. She said the team was down 20 points, and that frustration was understandable, and that it was on her to be better. That is not the behavior of a diva. That is not the behavior of a pain in the ass. That is the behavior of a competitor who cares deeply about winning and who is frustrated justifiably by a situation that is not matching her standards. The irony is that the qualities being weaponized against Clark in the current media narrative, the competitive fire, the emotional intensity, the refusal to accept losing quietly, are the exact same qualities that make her the most compelling and marketable player in the history of this sport. Those qualities are the product, not the problem. Conor McAffrey being 40 minutes away at the Noblesville Boom is good news for Caitlin Clark fans who want to believe she stays in Indiana long-term. It is a real signal that the personal infrastructure of her life is planted deeply in this state. But it is not a substitute for the professional and organizational conditions she needs to reach her championship ceiling. And right now, that gap between the personal roots that point toward staying and the organizational dysfunction that pushes toward leaving is the central tension of the most important story in women's basketball. The Indiana Fever have time to close that gap. They have the contract architecture, the financial capacity, and the talented core to build something genuinely great around the most transformative player in the modern era of this league. But time is not unlimited, goodwill is not renewable indefinitely, and Caitlin Clark is not going to wait forever for an organization to become worthy of what she brings to the table every single night. Fix the environment, build the right system, earn the extension, because right now, The Conor McCaffrey news and the contract option tell you she could stay. What happens inside that building over the rest of this season will determine whether she should. That is Street Hoops for today, and I need all of you loud in those comments right now. Does Conor McCaffrey taking that boom job change how you see Clark's future in Indiana? Do you think the Fever front office has what it takes to actually build the right environment around her before she hits restricted free agency? And what is your read on Stephanie White? Is she genuinely the right coach for this moment, or has her time already run out? Drop everything you have got down below. I am reading all of it. If you are not subscribed to Street Hoops yet, you are genuinely missing out. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and share this video, because this story is developing every single day, and we are on it. Street Hoops. Dre Fiverr. Let's go.